Salutations, kindred souls. Welcome back to this juicy beginning of what is a collaboration that Nino and I have been working on for quite some time now. For those of you that are new here, my name is Lux, and this is my dear friend Nino. And this is the beginning of this branch of the collaboration that is the Sanctum of Integration, which is a series of or a playlist in which we want to talk about all things that we resonate with together that her and I both enjoy talking about and are synonymously passionate about. So, welcome to this beautiful three-part series. And this is, to me, this is the most fantastic way to start off this version of the Sanctum, because what we're going to dive into is a bit of a three-part series on all things divine feminine. So, what is divine feminine? What does it really mean? What does it not? What does that mean in your human? And what does that mean in your real 3D life? And what are we going to do about that? So I'll quick start us off with a little bit of an introduction of why this topic came to be. So Nino and I were having just a lovely phone conversation one day about what is divine femininity? What does it really mean? And what is it not? And who are the people in our world that we know that do truly embody what divine feminine is? And who are the ones that feel off to us or don't necessarily resonate to us? And so that actually led me down a rabbit hole to look up more closely what those definitions mean. And in my looking them up, things got a little blurrier before they got clearer. And so thus began us developing and clarifying this conversation into what is going to be this series. So, Nino, why don't you give us a little bit of your intro as to why this is important to you and why you want to talk about it together?
Yeah, Lux, thank you for that beautiful introduction. We are definitely going to dive into all of that over this three-part series. And first, I want to just thank you for inviting me into this conversation. You and I have the best conversations just randomly. And the divine feminine is one that has been on my heart for quite some time, especially as I've been in this place of really wanting to figure out what does divine union mean and what does that look like. So in my foray of divine union, now I had to define for myself what is the divine feminine and what is divine masculine, and who cares? Like, right? Like, what gives? Like, what does this even mean? Why is it important to me? And so, keeping our focus on the divine feminine for this series, I really start to look at what those two words mean separately and then what do they mean together, right? Etymology is something that's really big as we start to really recognize how things are used in modern day versus what they used to mean, and what do we resonate with that might be on either side of that old school thinking, new school thinking, right? But it also helps us to really dive into and really come into connection with how does this feel in my body? Where does it sit in my body? And what is the resonance that I have with it? Because I think we can have a universal idea of what divine is, what feminine is, and what divine feminine is. And we can relate to that kind of collectively in this bigger, broader picture of what divine feminine is. But we could also have a very personal relationship with divine feminine. And we can go into that a little bit more of like when we get into the modelship of what I think or who I think really models divine feminine for me. But for me, to boil it down, it's the openness, the creation, and the softness to receive and to be received. For me, that kind of has the overarching understanding of how I relate to the divine feminine. And I really would love to hear, like, how does that resonate for you? What part of that are you taking for yourself? And overall, like, what do you think about the divine feminine as a collective and also in like that really personal relationship?
That's a really beautiful way for you to start us off in that overarching feel of what it means to you, as well as picking out those pieces of like how we're going to break it down, what it matters, and where you use it in life, what it means to you. And so thank you for that. That was delicious. I love that our conversations, you bring the poetry to our conversations. I would say that to me, divine feminine actually feels like a role. It feels like an identity for me. And that's personal to my journey. So without making that have to fit for everyone else, I would just say that to me, it feels like a role that I feel so called to embody. I feel so pulled to deeply understand and emanate that because that's what feels good in my body. And it feels good in terms of what shifts in my life happen when I stand strong in what is divine femininity. And so again, like you said, breaking those definitions apart. Oh, and I love that you said so beautifully that old school, new school thinking, because I think somewhere along the way of many of us pursuing what is divine feminine, there's a lot of definitions out there. There's a lot of key words that may or may not feel good to us. And again, like you said, some of that has to relate to what did those used to mean? What do they mean now? And what do they mean now in the context of our social and behavioral stereotypes? What are spiritual words and definitions or spiritual aspects of what that is? And what are the modern interpretations that get thrown around, like in the coaching industry or in the internet world of all the information out there flying out about what is divine feminine. And so that's essentially what this episode is about breaking apart those pieces and kind of dissecting out those key words so that each of us can be called to be aware of what resonates with us and what doesn't feel quite right about what is divine feminine to us. And so in my in my going down the rabbit hole of picking apart these definitions, I actually like breaking apart the three pieces of what is the definition of divine, what is the definition of feminine, and then is that a separate definition as the phrase divine feminine? And to me, they absolutely are three different things. Divine being relating to God, a deity, supremacy, holy, sacred. Sacred is a big one for me, holy and sacred, regardless of what your relationship to divinity is. I think most of us can accept that word holy as of high regard, of sacred importance. And then feminine, this is where to me the definition of feminine can get so lost in the internet sauce. Um, to me, the the dictionary definition says that it's traits and behaviors associated with woman. What is woman? We know nowadays that that has a lot of sensitivity to it, and I don't really believe it has to go there. So it's about what it feels like to you as a human, as your 3D human body. But to me, feminine, like you said, feels like receiving. It feels like softness. It feels like nurturing. So to me, they are descriptive traits or characteristics that fit within inside one human or one soul, and that seems to be the way they want to operate or the way they want to emanate out into the world, is with a little bit of nurturing and grace and sensitivity. To me, sensitivity is a key feature of what is feminine. um, to me the feminines I know that I enjoy being mentored by are very keen and aware and intuitive, not only of themselves, but in others around them and what's in their field. And so, again, that kind of goes back to squishing those things together of what is a divine feminine, which is to me a person who emanates a particular energy. They are aware that they carry themselves in a particular energy that is nurturing, creative, and receptive. Do you have anything that you could take my pushy kind of literal ways of breaking that down and soften it a little? Like what resonates to you when we were discussing what those definitions actually mean?
Yeah, I totally agree when it comes to this being more a characteristic or a quality that gets emanated by a human. And I believe that you can find feminine and masculine qualities in everyone, right? Whether you are physically in a male or a female body, like this is where your definition of it being more of a role or an identity really fits, rather than this being all about your biology, right? And when we start to see things as completely black and white, this or that, this is where we get ourselves into a lot of trouble. So your definition of feminine being qualities, characteristics, an emanation of energy really helps with kind of removing a little bit of the logic. Even though you think this is like super logical, it helps you remove the logical of having to go based off of biology, right? And nurturing is still life-giving, but is also life-affirming, and either a man or a woman can be life-affirming, can be nurturing. So they can have qualities of the feminine, and the divine aspect of it being more holy, more sacred, and I believe more whole really ties that together of I'm not just in the chaos of feminine qualities, because what we've talked about has been all of the quote unquote positive sides of feminine qualities, right? We also have negative sides of, or what could be perceived as negative sides of the feminine. And this is where we start to see further breakdowns of, the divine feminine versus the dark feminine, the Kalis versus the Kuan Yins, right? Where they're both feminine qualities. We're just seeing different sides of that one coin, and putting divine on top of that just for me makes it whole, it makes it sacred, and it makes it have this quality of purity, right? And not purity like, without spot, but purity as in this is the fullness of what it is, without the limitation, without the context, without the, conditioning that we put on it. And so when we look at divine feminine from these now two understandings, what is divine, pure, whole, sacred? What is feminine, both nurturing, soft, receiving, but also can have fierceness, can have power, can have rage, all of the things. Now we're starting to see that divine aspect of the feminine, the full range of what feminine is, right? What are you thinking here?
Wow. So you really truly stripped it down to so far down to its essence that I really believe that anybody could watch this and truly ask themselves, am I divine feminine? Do I resonate with that? Because it has, like you said, has nothing to do with the human body you're in. It has to do with, does that concept of wholeness, like you said, both light and dark, shadow and positive, those things, are you resonating with that? Does that feel like something that you're encompassing all of? And if that's primarily the way you exist in the world, then yes, you should consider yourself, like if that feels right to you, do you consider yourself a divine feminine, whether you're in a man's or a woman's body? You've pulled, like you said, you've pulled all the conditioning, all of the social definitions, and all of the taboo kinds of frameworks we try to put around this, and you've stripped it down to its true essence. And I just love that you described divine as whole, like not just holy and sacred, but whole as in encompassing all of those traits. Because, like you said, divine feminine is sometimes chaos, sometimes void, sometimes nurturing, sometimes sensitive, sometimes rageful, emotional. You know what I mean? So embracing the whole spectrum and wanting to embody all of that, to me, is what signals to a person that yes, I resonate as a divine feminine. And so I think you just truly, you plucked the trueness out of all of the stuff that the rest of the world tries to make it what it is, and you showed us what it really is, which is this essence. And are you willing and wanting to be all of it? And so that, to me, just, you summed it up right there of like what it is. And so I think that's a really beautiful way to transition into, do you want to add a little bit of clarity of kind of a separate distinction between what is a feminine versus what is a divine feminine. So to me, it's not about right and wrong, or you're doing it well or you're not doing it well, but can you offer a clarity that helps a person choose to decide, like, oh, do I really, really resonate with this term divine feminine versus am I just a feminine in nature? What makes it that distinction for you?
Yeah, I believe I alluded to this a little bit earlier when I defined divine, right? That wholeness. Um, for me, the difference between just being feminine, a woman, is not having any conscious understanding of what what it is to emanate the feminine versus when we add divine, this is conscious, this is whole, this is me saying, I'm going to take all of it and I'm going to honor all of it. And I'm not going to make one aspect of the feminine wrong just because, it's not socially accepted or culturally accepted. It is coming into full union with what the emanation and energy of feminine is in all of its aspects. And when we can get to that point, I think that is divine because one, we're saying whole, holy, holistic, sacred, because we are seeing in devotion the feminine in all of her range is beautiful, even in her chaos, even in her thrashing emotionality. That is equally important to who we are and to our experience in this world. And when we come into that relationship of devoting to that, of honoring that and respecting that, now we are not making any part of us wrong. And we're coming into that wholeness, that divinity within ourselves and all around us. That for me is a difference between saying, yeah, I'm a feminine, soft girl, love the pink life, type of feminine woman who likes to get my nails done and all that good stuff. Like that's surface level feminine for me, and nothing wrong with that. But that is just the appearance part of feminine, and also the like first layer of provision of feminine, where feminine in its divinity is so deep, and you can really root in there, and you can study her for years upon years upon years, and still not feel like you've gotten the full depth of her. That's what makes it divine. We will never fully understand because it's so whole and we have such a like limited perception and perspective here on earth side, right? But we can devote ourselves to becoming more divine.
I love that. So the two aha keywords you gave me there is awareness, like a divine feminine is aware that this is the energy that they're pursuing, embodying, or are embodying and emanating, and depth. Depth just resounded so strongly in me because as the more I choose to develop and embody and pursue what is divine feminine as a role, as an entity, the more I realize that it has revealed depth to me that previous versions of me years ago didn't know was there. And so I'm just so fascinated and grateful for going on this journey of pursuing all that is divine feminine, because I've discovered that there is a well of depth within me that not only do I enjoy being in, but I want to share. I want to share what that is and what that means, and help other people tap into that awesome feeling of experiencing your own depth. And so yeah, you just those two words really summed it up for me as to what is divine feminine, what are those key things that you're feeling for. And so this would be a great place for me to mention to our listeners that if these words are starting to resonate with you, this depth, this awareness, this consciousness, this call to, I don't want to say, for lack of a better phrase, be somebody, like I'm feeling pulled to be some type of somebody, I would really love to invite our listeners to stick around on both of our channels, because I'm getting ready. I am launching a Divine Feminine membership. So if these things really either resonate strongly with you and you want to go deeper, or you're curious enough that the pull is there and you're like, I really want to know more about this. I don't know if this is me, but I want to find out. I want to build a community around this. I want to build a community and a membership of divine feminines that really want to sink into this and immerse themselves and then pride themselves in, wow, I really love this. I understand this and I want to be part of this. And I want to show other people how me resonating and emanating strongly in who I really am, that is divine feminine, changes my world. And so to me, that fits so nicely with my general YouTube channel as well as this divine feminine membership, because it's about integrating so beautifully all that is divine feminine and who you are, that now you're starting to see real life changes in your life. So thank you all for taking a second to listen to that, and I hope that you'll stick around for that membership and share it with those that sound like a divine feminine or might learn more about how to change their life because they're going down the pursuit of what is divine feminine. So, in kind of wrapping this up, putting a bow on it, I would love your opinion, Nino, on what things out there in noticing like all of the conversations you and I have had about what is divine feminine, what it is not, and maybe give a great example of who is a great divine feminine to you, and not necessarily who's not a great divine feminine, but maybe keywords or characteristics out there that suggest not deep enough of a concept of what is divine feminine, to put it in a polite and respectful type of way.
Yeah. So the first image that I ever get when it comes to a divine feminine for me is always Mother Mary, right? And we can say, oh, meek and humble and docile. Oh, Mary, she's so quiet. But there is a depth to her that the more that you are in mentorship with her, the more that you are in relationship with her as the mother emanation, that is an aspect of the divine feminine that she embodied so well and continues to usher into the world. But also, there's this deep sadness that she has endured, right, through her son's life and after. And this is something that, as a feminine woman, like I really resonated with her suffering, her sadness, but also her quietness and how much strength anyone who's ever been in relationship with her can receive from her. And it shows to me that full range, right, of woman, of divine feminine. And we don't need to all be this dark feminine in order to be divine. So for me, number one will always be Mother Mary. And then from there, to try to get kind of ideas from the world, I've had actually a very hard time finding somebody that I consider divine feminine, and I haven't quite met anyone in like social media or the mainstream media that I feel really captures this divine feminine essence. But I've had mentors that really feel this nurturing, this expansiveness, and we can put links in the bottom for their channels. But for me, a divine feminine in real life is like Martine de Luna of Edenic Woman membership. The vastness of her expression and her field and the way that she holds women for me feels very divine feminine. And there is the full experience of womanhood from maiden to mother, wife, and she's recently experienced a death in family. So like she's had the full experience and range, and she has met it so beautifully and deeply that a living emanation of divine feminine that I'm in contact with, I would definitely say her. And in that vein, I think I've also seen in social media how easy it is to see just feminine without divine in it. I've seen the dark feminine without the divine. I've seen the light feminine without the divine. And the people that I think of for those that are pretty popular are, of course, Beyonce and Taylor Swift, where they have that kind of darker fiercer energy, and then you have that softer, girl next door kind of energy. I'm thinking like early Taylor Swift, right? But neither of those for me feel like they have touched divine in their femininity, even though they are fully expressing as feminine women. So I'd be curious, if you in preparing for this and kind of thinking about this ahead of time, have you really noticed any that you would call like divine feminine or just feminine that are role models or just examples of either of these for you?
Yeah. I actually want to take an extra second to dwell on Divine Mother Mary for a minute, because what really stood out to me when you were describing her that I realized resonates with me is that she is the epitome of surrender. And so to me, the role of divine feminine comes this very strong coin, two-sided coin of the epitome of what is true surrender to not my will, but yours. But also in my experience as well, that the feminine leads energetically. So just because you are the epitome of surrender does not mean that you are not a leader in many, many forms, especially energy. To me, one of the most important things I can do as a divine feminine is lead with my energetic presence, not with what I say, not with my job, not with where I'm going or what I'm doing necessarily, but my physical presence and the way I'm carrying myself changes a room. It changes my home life. It changes my household. So to me, she's a beautiful example of there is so much strength in surrender that's not meek and mild by any means. That is true strength when you can surrender to that kind of depth, as well as even in her own life experience, she was leading energetically, not with words, but with presence and her nurturing capabilities. And so to me, you just beautifully described a fantastic example of what a person emanates, like these two major characteristics that seem to be at odds with each other, but in actuality are meant to be harmonized together in a person, and she does that beautifully. The only person I can think of that comes to mind at the moment that I feel like was a recent good example in a modern kind of celebrity type world is Emma Watson. I recently listened to an interview she did with Jay Shetty, and she dove so deep into the discovering of herself. It wasn't about being famous or powerful or an influence. It was about her transition into true womanhood and understanding like who am I really in peeling all of this stuff back. And so her journey to me more so describes what it is to learn about like what is the difference between feminine and divine feminine, and leaning towards, oh well, I really truly want this, you know what I mean, I want more depth. And so then you recognize in that moment, you choose the awareness of there's more to femininity than this. How do I go deeper? How do I scratch this itch I'm now feeling? And so she was just the only relevant example I can think of a person who you might deem as super feminine or, a feminine influence. But in her discovery that there's more to it than that, she starts to emanate her true and deeper self.
I'm going to pause you there because I love what you're showing here, right? It's the desire to dig deeper, to discover. And I think that this is really a, a similar but rooted in a different place quality that men have, right? I think the masculine also has this desire to discover, just discover himself, but also to discover how much he can do in the world, how much he can conquer in the world. Whereas a woman, the divine feminine woman, her place of discovery is how deep can she get? How rooted can she get within herself, her domain, her home, and then emanate that out, right? So her way of discovery is, and not to say like the divine feminine is a homebody or a homemaker, but it is really about the home within her body, the home within her beingness that is emanated out. And that is what is kind of emanated from her. Whereas the masculine, he's constantly going out, piercing out, right? And the woman is inviting in, inviting deeper, coming more inside, whereas a male goes out, right? For me, that part of how you described Emma Watson of being discovery of self, not from trying to be something or do something, but to just see like, who am I in all of this as an actress, as a woman, as a, whatever, who am I? And letting all those layers unpeel, like that is divine feminine.
Truly. And I think one little piece I'll add on to that, because I love that you started to just touch on the fact that there is the other side of this coin that is divine masculine, and how, like you said, a masculine expands outwardly in their discovery, and a feminine expands inwardly, dives deeper, deeper. And to me, that was a huge aha moment in my personal journey of starting to understand that not only is that what it is, but I think I like that. I think that's what I want to dive deeper into, because I spent most of my young adult, early childhood, up to young adult life pushing and doing and like overly in my masculine energy. And I felt exhausted. Like I don't feel me 10 years ago feels like 100% different person than me today, because I went, wow, this is something about this isn't right, because I don't want to do my whole life feeling exhausted. I want to do my life feeling empowered and energized. And so as I started to discover what divine feminine was, what is her characteristics, how does she fuel herself, how does she succeed in the world, we're still humans on this 3D planet, how does she do it? I started to understand that when I started leaning into my divine feminine as characteristic traits and as a role, I felt more at home. I felt more inside of me. I felt more like myself. Whereas, being more in my masculine energy, having it, but letting it dominate me, I was just a really depleted person and really out of place. And so I think this is a really beautiful place to kind of leave off as our teaser for part two, which is where we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the differences between divine masculine and feminine. Today, we wanted to give you a really juicy, full intro as to like, what is divine feminine? Why are we talking about it? And why do we care? And to let you decide for yourself if this is intriguing enough and powerful enough to pull you into digging deeper. And so in the next part of our video series, we're going to discern differences between divine masculine and divine feminine. How do we balance those? How do we choose? Do we have to choose one or the other? All of those juicy questions. So is there anything else you want to wrap up this very specific intro of what is divine feminine for us today?
The only thing I would say here is take what resonates, leave what doesn't, because at the end of the day, what divine feminine is very personal. And we can have a collective understanding of the divine feminine and masculine, but none of that will matter if that's not your personal experience with it. And this conversation is meant to give you an increased perception and perspective of what divine feminine could mean to you. So always only take what we're saying as our experience and start to see for yourself, do I resonate with that? Do I not? And why not? Or on either side of those, why do I resonate with this? Why do I not resonate with it? And how does this look like for me? At the end of the day, you're having a relationship with the divine, with the feminine and masculine aspects, and you get to choose what on the spectrum of divine masculine and divine feminine is to you. And you don't have to be all over the spectrum. You can take the area, that bandwidth of area that resonates with you, and you can explore that for the rest of your life and still be just at the surface, which is totally okay and perfect.
Right. I love that you've invited us to close with, we're not trying to smush our audience into this definition. We're not trying to fit you into a mold. We're inviting you into an exploration of what is true for you, and so in our series, I'm sure you can agree with me that our goal here isn't to push someone to fit in or not fit into this concept that is divine feminine, but to invite you into what about it pulls you or doesn't pull you, and how would you like to develop this intimate relationship with yourself in your relationship with what is divinity, what is masculine and femininity for yourself, not just because Nino and I think you should fit in this box. Yeah. So it's a very clear and polite clarification that we are by no means forcing a definition on anyone. We are enjoying this delicious invitation into discovering what it is for you, listener. So I think that was a really beautiful place to close. And I can't wait to see who joins us for this lovely part 2. And thank you all so much for being here and being intrigued by what is divine feminine. And we will see you all next time in the Sanctum. Take care.